Hello everyone, welcome to a new series on this channel called Who Did It Best? This is a series where I take two different adaptations of the same work and compare the two to see which is the superior product. You might say this is similar to the Nostalgia Critic's Old versus New series on his channel, except without the whole old and new part. But without further ado, let's jump into one of my favorite areas of study, the Borgias. I fucking love the Borgias. I love everything to do with the Borgias. In fact, you show me any kind of adaptation with the Borgias on it, and you have my attention. And why wouldn't I be interested in them? The Borgias are basically legends at this point. We in the 21st century have grown quite fond, in fact, of this 14th century papal crime family, and they are interesting in a kind of taboo sort of way. The idea of the most holy office in all of Christendom being held by a family of incestuous murdering psychopaths is pretty awesome. But if you're not a huge history nerd, you might be asking yourself, who were the Borgias? Well, let me give you the rundown. So if you didn't know, in the middle of the 1400s, a Spaniard by the name of Rodrigo Borgia came to Rome as a high-standing member of the church. Over the next few decades, he would begin working his way up the political ladder and father many children along the way. And then in 1492, he was elected as Pope of Rome. I say elected. What follows in the 11 years leading up to his death in 1503 is a lot. A shitload of wars happen, his eldest son is killed, which may or may not have been caused by his other children. His daughter is married off for political gain 3 times, and his other son basically conquers half of the Italian states. This infamy over the next 500 years would see the Borgias reincarnated in several works of fiction, theater, and music. And then, in 2011, Showtime's launched the very first full-scale adaptation of the Borgia legacy in the TV show simply named The Borgias. The show was a massive hit with audiences and critics, especially during its 2nd and 3rd season. But as these things go, much in the way of Harry's Law, HBO took one look at the stats and said, "Spend money too much, fuck the fans, kill it with fire." And the series basically doesn't even end its 3rd season before it's unceremoniously cancelled without even close to a decisive ending. However, across the water and completely unrelated is another version of the adaptation of the Borgias, and this is simply named Borgia.
Rome, its capital, is also divided into warring factions: the Orsini, the Colonna, and the Borgia.
It was being developed for a European audience and pulls zero strings when it comes to the blood, death, gore, and grittiness and realism, which, because it's European, there was certainly plenty of. So as you can see, these two adaptations are very different, mainly being that Borgia, the Netflix one, actually did run for 3 seasons as well, but managed to yield a decisive conclusion. So which of the two is the superior product? The ultra gritty Netflix version or the heavily romanticized HBO version? Well, that's why I'm here to give you my answer to the question of who did it best, Borgia versus the Borgias. So let's cut this baby open and see what makes them tick. We'll be taking tallying points in each category of characters to see which one was superior. This episode will focus primarily on background characters and the non-Borgia characters of the shows, and next video will be primarily focused on the Borgia family and the story itself, because as these are both dramas, the story is what's going to sink or float these stories. So without further ado, let's break into some background characters. There are a lot of them. So Friar Savonarola was of the Dominican order in Florence near the end of the 1400s. He was a monk who believed in very strict adherence to Christian doctrine and taught the cleansing of one's souls through flagellation, burning of vanities, and stripping oneself of valuables. His teachings became incredibly popular in the late 1400s, and he wielded enormous power and influence over the people. He was also a very outspoken and public enemy of the Borgia papacy, of which he was then captured, tortured, and killed for it. In HBO, he's depicted as this kind of old monk wearing burlap robes and giving these really long, sweeping speeches of hellfire and brimstone, which is all good for dramatic effect, but I'm not really sure about what it does for his character. Netflix, on the other hand, decides not to go for the opulent role and decides to portray him as a young and handsome monk with a soft-spoken voice, which, yes, he still wants you to burn all your valuables, but he does it in a really gentle way. As to which of them is better, I will say I did enjoy the spastic lunatic that HBO gave us. I felt that the best parts of this character was not Friar Savonarola himself, but actually the effect he had on the people of Florence. His little Children of the Corn army, them burning a woman as a witch, the bonfire of vanities, it was all great, but whenever the scenes had to focus directly on Savonarola himself, I felt like the scenes just boring. On the other side of things, Netflix was able to give us this very charismatic and gentle monk, which may not have been the most accurate, but I do think he can carry a scene much better than the HBO version. Even when he's addressing his very own congregation, it's a very interesting scene because it looks like it's actually real. So, point goes to Netflix. In contrast with Friar Savonarola, where the two depictions of him in each version were slightly similar, Cardinal della Rovere's depiction in HBO and Netflix couldn't be more different. Cardinal della Rovere was a cardinal who challenged Pope Borgia to the throne of St. Peter's after Pope Innocent's death, and lost the election, then subsequently spent the remaining years in Rome trying to circumvent the authority of the Borgia papacy. He was eventually disgraced and left Rome for a while, returning after Rodrigo Borgia's death to be crowned the next pope. The big difference is their level of importance in the story. In HBO, he was a big character and a driving force behind the narrative. In Netflix, not so much. In HBO, he had an extensive arc, while in Netflix, he's very much stationed in the grumpy old man archetype, and subsequently stays there for the rest of the series. He is gay, though. For some reason. In HBO, it was slightly implied that he might swing the other way, although it was extremely subtle. In Netflix, on the other hand, nope, no subtlety. Total homo pope. So, yes, point goes to HBO for actually having a character. Point goes to HBO. Giulia Farnese is a bit of an odd duck in this series. Both versions have her as the mistress of Rodrigo Borgia. However, that's basically where the similarities end, because in Netflix, Giulia Farnese is, in no uncertain terms, a cunt. She is a cunt. The woman will poison, proxy rape, and castrate anyone who gets in the way of the betterment of her family. That being said, they do, however, manage to build this really genuine brotherly and sisterly bond between her and her brother Alessandro, who is also a major character in the Netflix version, but not so much in the HBO version. In HBO, the bond is still there, but it's not even close to being on the same degree. I mean, Alessandro in the HBO version basically amounts to nothing, even though he would go on to be crowned Pope Paul II. While in Netflix, you could easily see him as Pope throughout his development. Giulia in HBO does try to get some character by developing this kind of Roman renovation system with her, Lucrezia, and Venozza, and she does get a few good laughs here and there with Rodrigo trying to cheat on her and her not finding out. However, I will say I do enjoy Lucrezia's interactions with her better in the HBO version.
It's a gift. From Giulia to Lucrezia.
Furthermore, I feel like this character was slightly fan-fictioned into the series. Like how in HBO, Giulia and Lucrezia are both taken prisoner by the French army, while in Netflix, it was only Giulia. From there, she manages to single-handedly save Rome from the siege of the French, which did not happen at all. But in terms of absolute stupidity, that does not even come close to the writers of the Netflix version of the Borgias writing Giulia Farnese as a witch.
And use your witchcraft.
I know they try and make it out as if she's not really a witch, she just thinks she is, but seriously, they wrote Giulia Farnese as a witch. With all that being said, I still prefer Giulia Farnese from the Netflix version, if just for her interactions with her brother and her longevity in the series in later episodes. So, point goes to Netflix. And you know what? Add another point for her brother Alessandro. 2 points go to Netflix. Now on to one of the most fascinating women in history, Catalina Schwartz, or as Jeremy Irons prefers to pronounce it, Schwartz.
Sforza. Why?
It's like he's gargling a frog. If you read anything up on Catalina Schwartz, you'll find out she was quite the badass back in her time. And this is why her portrayal in Netflix baffles me. To say that she's just there is an understatement. She's on screen for all of about 13 seconds, and the development of her entire character seems to be in the way of,
You be silent, Catalan.
stuck-up bitch. While in the HBO version, she is in her own dimension of awesome.
Here is my land. Take it if you can. My cannons will answer your call.
She's a noblewoman, yes, but a whole episode is devoted to her way of thinking and us understanding her character, how she won't bow to anyone or show any kind of weakness unless it serves her cause, how she'll use any means in order to defeat her adversaries. Even Cesare was being one-upped and constantly beaten by Catalina Schwartz. However, in Netflix, I got nothing. In Netflix, I will say she did have this one interesting standoff scene with Cesare where she was threatening to blow herself up rather than let him take her alive. It had the promise of being a really cool standoff scene between her and Cesare. Something similar was done in HBO with her threatening to hang herself then be taken as his prisoner. And it's a really interesting scene because in HBO, Cesare has an actual emotional dilemma about whether to serve her father or to save Catalina, but then in Netflix he just calls her bluff and takes her prisoner. The scene was meant to accent how awesome Cesare was and not to show any kind of interest in Catalina Schwartz. In HBO, the two seem to kind of share this emotional bond, this kind of spider and fly mentality. In Netflix,
I will defeat Catalina Schwartz Ax, then I will fuck her! Then I will kill her! Then I will fuck her again!
yeah. In HBO, on the other hand, she's sympathetic, likable, and enjoyable to watch. Take these two basically the same scenes back to back. Her fortress in Forlì is under siege and a Borgia has taken her son hostage. In Netflix, it was Cesare. In HBO, it was Juan. They threaten to execute her child, where she then climbs up onto the wall and shouts her phrase, "I have the means to make 10 more sons." In HBO, the scene is built up perfectly. It's heartbreaking to see her go through the agony as Katerina sees her son suffer. Now, look at them back to back. In HBO, emotion, heartbreak, sorrow. In Netflix,
I have the mold to make more.
well, she said the line?
Do you see? Here.
I'm all for the summer of love look, but let that thing see daylight once, Katerina. Jesus Christ.
I have the means to produce 10 more sons. And they will hunt you down and send you to your grave.
So, yeah, point goes to HBO. So, Borgia leads the race 3-2 as we go into our final character of this episode, Michelotto, the famed manservant assassin of Cesare Borgia. In HBO, he's fast, he's deadly. In Netflix, he's there. In HBO, he's ruthless, he's sad, he's heartbroken. In Netflix, he has a cool mask. In HBO, he's adorable, he's got a bromance with Cesare and a galmance with Lucrezia, and he's also getting fucked up the ass. Okay, moving on. I know this isn't a fair fight in these two characters, but I loved Michelotto far too much to leave him out. What can I say about the guy? He's pure awesome. He does all the dastardly and evil things the Borgias do, but you just can't stay mad at him. He's just so adorable. His love life alone on screen is enough to win him the point, as his heart is broken again and again. Furthermore, it is interesting to see a character just absolutely so cutthroat, bloody, and evil, and yet he's still likable and devoted. There's a point where he even drowns a child, for God's sakes, and you know what? You still forgive him. You still like him. So yes, topping off the end of this episode, point goes to HBO. That concludes part 1 with the scores evenly tied 3-3. Tune in next time to see us go through the Borgia family themselves and finally answer the question of who did it best, Borgia versus Borgia. I'm your host, Bookmark. See you later.